This session is near and dear to my heart because I believe getting into leadership starts well before you get the position. And the way we've structured this is really to talk about how to build your brand prior to promotion. Shifting from an individual contributor to a manager, there's many moving pieces in it, but we're going to break down this journey with our panelists, Jasmine, Kelly, and Paul. We're going to look on their transitions, kind of leaving you tips and tricks on how to influence your current leadership, and equally as important, your current peers, to align them with the new narrative. So for introductions, Jasmine, I'd like to start with you. Can you just give us your name, role at the company, then we'll pass it along and get started.
Yes, thank you so much, Chris. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I am Jasmine Omorobe. I am a senior solution consultant at Workday in the human capital management space. I've been here for about 5 years, and I'm super excited to talk about how I've transitioned in terms of internal mobility over that time. Thank you.
Thanks, Jasmine. And we're trying to fix the camera now, so I appreciate you. Over to you, Kelly, then over to Paul.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I am so excited and honored and privileged to be here today. My role is as Director of Solution Consulting at DocuSign. I've been at DocuSign for a little over 7 years, but my role has evolved over that time. I started as an individual contributor and over the years have moved up the ranks. And much like you, Chris, I'm super passionate about this topic, and I'm thrilled to be able to be here to speak to all of the folks here that are thinking about that next step in their leadership journey.
Hi, morning, afternoon, everybody. Paul Harris here. Yeah, like Jasmine and Kelly, super excited and really quite honoured actually to get to speak today and open up this session. I'm a principal solution architect of Loftware, and I'm actually in the process of transitioning over into a management role starting in January. So really kind of keen to get into this discussion today. My role at Loftware has changed quite a lot over the last 5-6 years, and that has kind of included time spent as an individual contributor, actually as a manager, going back to an IC, and then actually now moving back towards that management and to leadership as well. So you're really keen to get into it and speak to all of you.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Kelly, Jasmine. I really appreciate it. I'll open this up by asking a question. And this is kind of an interesting piece because every company has different signals to leadership on what's important. And so I'm really interested about one example of an opportunity or a project that you took as an IC that sent a clear signal to your leadership team that you were just more interested in management as a next step. A lot of people say they want to be a manager, but what was that thing that really proved to your leadership team that you were interested? I love to see your faces too. We're back. Awesome. So I will open that question up, and I'm going to start with you, Jasmine, just to kind of kick it off. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. So for me, I think it was a number of different items, right? There were a lot of complex deals. So as I got into my position, being able to raise my hand, I think for anything and everything, that's part of how I started to build not anything and everything, strategically, things that had high visibility, things that allowed me to work with teams cross-functionally as well. But there was a really complex deal that we had for several years. It was kind of one of those where every year they just want you to come back and show it to them again, sort of thing, without making a decision. And there were some complexities there of some things that Workday didn't necessarily do yet, and then some things that they wanted. And so it allowed me to have an opportunity to go talk with our product team, with our strategy teams, with our deployment teams. And I was able to really figure out what we could do for this particular account. And that was one where it was high visibility afterwards. Like we were able to really move the needle. But I would say in general, as an individual contributor, building a brand of like, hey, Jasmine will do that. Like there's something difficult, Jasmine's not going to shy away from that. So being willing to raise my hand, even when it got tough, or even when I wasn't quite sure how Jasmine was going to do that, figuring it out after I raised my hand to say, I'll jump in there and start the problem solving.
I love that. It's a good example of like the shift from pure tactical work to abstract work. And that's so important, the ability to think creatively like that. Over to you, Kelly.
Mine's a little bit different. Mine was really through the employee resource group route. So myself and Leah McTiernan, who you'll actually be hearing from a little bit later today, as well as Kiana Aurelia, We have what's called WISE at DocuSign, which stands for Women in Solution Excellence. I should put a shout out real quick too. I'm an executive sponsor for the PreSales Collective WISE organization. So definitely check us out too. I have to put that plug in. But we started this really out of just the fact of during my interview, it was myself and Leah, and she's like, wait, how did you find out about this role? You're basically a female, right? And we realized just we need to encourage more diversity in our solution consulting org. And the more organizations we talked to, the more we found that that was a real need. So I had the opportunity to work with Leah, who's the vice president of our organization, on developing this employee resource group, which we had no idea really what we were doing at the time, but it just gave me so much opportunity to learn how to promote my brand, how to network. And eventually we started to create what we call a steering committee. And I led that steering committee, and that steering committee started having subcommittees, which made me really have the opportunity to get some kind of sense of what it's like to be a manager, and then almost a manager of managers as well. So kind of learning on the job. And again, continuing to build my brand before I even had the opportunity to start doing that. So it's kind of my favorite pastime. It's just a different way to think about getting that leadership experience within your own organization.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, and you're right. It's like everybody's journey is a little different. That's a really good example of something that people, I think, could do right now, and you don't need anybody to tell you there's an open rec for it.
And I've been consistently surprised and amazed at all of the opportunities that it's brought to me. I started with a great goal, and the dividends have continued to pay off in ways that I never expected, anticipated, or imagined. So I highly recommend it.
Awesome. Over to you, Paul. I hope it's as exciting as your awesome LinkedIn content. I'm always laughing at your videos.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I'll bring the LinkedIn content actually back around, because it does kind of play a part here, right? And I think Jasmine and Kelly have done a great job of talking about building that brand internally. And you talk about that, and sometimes people say, okay, so what is it that, how do you do that? And there's the kind of key thing that I would say, and I guess a recent example is I was looking at how we operate in our pre-sales and kind of going, what's something that I find in my day-to-day that's super frustrating, right? That I wish if I could deal with this problem, it would make my life so much easier. Because I can guarantee that if you have that issue, probably everybody else does as well. And your manager probably feels it, your director, so that will go up the organization. And so what I did, and there's a few different kind of projects and programs that I kind of looked at. But what that did was you have to then start taking that selling skill you have and starting to sell internally and saying, hey, I found a problem that we have, or I found an efficiency that we can gain. Here's a way that we can go and solve that. And what that then made me have to do was I then sell it to my manager, to my director, but I then have to go and sell to my SVP and ultimately up to my CEO and my CFO and say, this is why we've got to go and make this investment. So it really kind of starts to elevate you in the organization. People start to see who you are, because they're not just going to kind of know you if you don't make your name known. But what it does is it's kind of putting you out there, and they go, oh, hang on. All right, he clearly is interested in this, and he clearly wants to have an influence. But the other side of it is that you're building those relationships as well. As you go through those conversations, as I was engaging and working actually very closely with my director at the time, I was building a really strong relationship with him, to the point when this opportunity came around, he was like, hey, I know you really well. We've got a super good working relationship. I'd love you to come and work for me directly. And I think it's having that then it just feels like, oh, I'm sort of slotting into a role much more than having to really go out and be out there. And the LinkedIn thing as well, right? Just to channel that. So as Chris alluded to, and some of you that follow me will know, I love talking about pre-sales on LinkedIn. And I put kind of video content out there, written content. And that has played a part, because it's also showing another kind of level, another dimension to who you are, and a passion about what your product is or what your role is, because again, that stuff's getting seen, and it's just, it's not big flash. It doesn't have to be like really complicated, but it just shows that you've got that creativity and interest to kind of go and do a bit more than you do today.
Excellent, Paul. I love that. You're like, solve the problem everybody's annoyed with, and it's a huge win, right? And it also trickles up. Good points, all of you. Really wonderful points. There's a question actually around how to start a WISE group. I would love to continue that in the WISE discussions, because I think, Kelly, you kind of nailed something that I hadn't thought of, which is just a very different way to show your leadership and exercise something that's important to you.
Yes, please. Please join the WISE Slack channel, the Women in Solution Excellence Slack channel. We have a whole playbook and a whole team here of folks that are here to help you. We've helped probably 25 companies now stand up WISE organizations through PSC.
Oh my gosh. All right, awesome. And this goes back to the community. I mean, now is the time, but this community is, these are the people, this is what the community looks like. This isn't the Chris story. It's not anybody's story. And this is just a perfect example of some wonderful work that we need to lean into. I love that, Kelly. All right, next question for you. I know for me, one of my most, I think it was like a self-conscious thing when I got into management, because I started managing a team I was on, was, what are my peers going to think? Are they going to see me as a manager, or are they going to see Chris, the IC, who is in the trenches with them? And I would love to hear your take, and maybe giving some tips and tricks on shifting the perspective of your peers. Give us some sort of like takeaway that can help start that story within your peers before you go and manage that team.
Yeah, I appreciate that question, Chris, because it can be such a great opportunity or a double-edged sword at the same time, depending upon how things are set up, right? So that's exactly what happened to me. The team that I was on, I eventually became the manager for that team. So one day I was peers with people, and the next day I was their boss, which felt weird for sure. And I was really worried about how people were going to react. But I was very fortunate in that I tried to broach that topic with everyone that was now on my team. And everyone that I talked to said, oh, well, we just assumed you were going to be in that role. So this just feels very natural, which was awesome. But I think whenever I do these sessions, as I was saying to Chris in our prep call, I like to leave folks with very actionable things that they can do right away. Because now's the time, if you're an individual contributor and you're looking to become a leader, now's the time to be doing some of these things. So a great example is my director at the time, who's amazing, Dan. He knew my goals. I was very, very clear and very open with him as far as what I wanted to do with my goals. And now, of course, you still have to earn the right? But he started doing little things like when he would be out of the office, I would be his backup on PTO. So I would be his out of office message. I asked him if I could start, leading different parts of the team meetings. I asked him if I could get involved in the interviews for folks when we were hiring. So lots of these little things so that I was getting that perception out there that it would be a natural next step. It's not quite as easy as that for sure, but these are a couple little things, get involved in the interview process, because if you think about that, each new person that comes into the company is going to already be looking you as a leader. That perception of, taking care of the out of office things, like I'm going to be that backup, right? That I think is huge. Proactively ask, and not just ask, but come prepared with topics for sessions that you can lead in your team meetings. Because again, you're going to be showing leadership quality to your boss, who's very likely going to be part of that hiring process. And you're going to, again, be creating that perception of that leader in that role. And there's a million more, but I think those are 3 really good examples to start doing today, so that, when that situation comes, hopefully you'll have the same response of, oh, we just assumed, you would take that role.
I love that, Kelly. I'm going to share those in the chat. We're talking
Great.
about, come prepared with topics to the team meeting, right? Give yourself a slot, earn your table, earn your seat, take your seat to the team meeting, and get into the interview process. Those are two really good things. Jasmine, over to you.
Yeah, so I have not had the experience of being a people leader on my team. I'm here more from the IC perspective, but I definitely agree with Kelly in terms of being able to, well, I would even back up a little bit to think about the self-reflection. I think anytime you're thinking about brand building, like what is your special sauce? What do you do that no one else does? Identifying what your niche is on your team. Like, is it that you're missing some area or some product expertise? Is it that your team doesn't have connections in a certain area and you can start to build those? So really defining who you are and who you want to be. I think that's very pertinent to then starting to show up as that person. So to Kelly saying, hey, I want to be in leadership, starting to raise your hand when things come up, or letting your leadership know directly and communicating that, hey, I'm ready for more. And also to the point of having to earn your right. So being able to be really good at what you're tasked to do already, finding ways to shine, finding ways to get more visibility and exposure to different things in that area. And then I also like the idea of bringing folks along with you. Of it doesn't have to be, you don't have to create a dynamic even before moving into management of like, hey, I'm better than all of you. Like I'm the chosen one. I'm heading up next. But I think bringing folks along of, hey, how can we all find areas where we can all be more efficient? To Paul's point, how can we bring folks along with us? And then, of course, transitioning into leadership would be a whole different dynamic. But I think there are some steps to be taken along the way that show you're different, but you're also relatable. You're keeping things relevant and moving forward with everyone together, but still standing out.
Lean into your superpower. And Jasmine, I mean, you don't have to be a manager to be a leader either, right? That's a whole different topic to unpack. And I wish we had a little time for it, but management and leadership are two different things. And one doesn't always come with the other. So over to you,
Agreed.
Paul. I mean, yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. That's right. I'm also now in an IC leadership role, and I think that is, of the many things that I think are great about this career, that's one of it's kind of unique in that you can really build a very senior leadership role and not have to manage people. You can go and be a field CTO, which is an IC role, but it's a C-suite role as well. So I think it's something, again, I guess for folks on this call, if you're thinking, hey, I want to move into leadership, I'm not quite sure if I want to manage people, you don't have to manage people. One is they're two separate things. But I think the question about how do you take that team with you, and when it is kind of an inevitability, the only situation in which that's probably not going to happen, of you're going from being a peer to then being their boss, is either if you join a company as a manager or if you go and take on a completely different team. So it's something that everyone's going to encounter. And I think the thing for me is really staying humble in that and going and being open with your team and saying, look, I need you to put faith in me and trust me. I am not here because I'm perfect. I'm here because I said I want to do this. But what matters to me is that you are successful. And I think if you can communicate that message across, it really starts to build a partnership with each member of your team. And think about what it is. Who is your if it's your current manager or previous manager, who you had a really great relationship with, what was it about them and the way they work with you that made you have such a great relationship? And take those and start to apply that to how you're working with your new team. And over time, they will come to see you as that position of authority and that person they can speak to, right? Because also it's an authority role. You're the manager. You are, to an extent, telling them what they're doing and what their role is, but you're also there to support them. And I think this comes to when we talk about leadership. Something that I'm super kind of passionate about is leadership. Is you don't have to lead from the front. You can lead from the middle. You can lead from the back. Being a leader, being a manager isn't about being, out in front of everybody. I think that's kind of, it almost shouldn't be about that. And actually it's about, you are at the back, you're there kind of making sure that everyone is on the right track and on the right path. But, you're not the kind of always putting yourself in front of them. You're actually saying, look, I want to put you forward because you're the rock stars. You're the ones who want to get your name up the lights. And what can I do to enable you to get there?
That's a great point. I mean, it's lonely at the top, right? You gotta surround yourself with people who see you as a partner, see you as that same side of the table. That's good stuff. Now that kind of unpacks the leadership without the management title. And we've talked about the desire and kind of how to like make that brand internally. I'm curious, Paul, since you've kind of bounced back and forth, like, have you done this in the same company? You've bounced from management to IC, then now you're going back into management, or is it a different organization? Or
so I went from IC to management at Loftware. So I went from being in professional services into pre-sales and then into management at Loftware, and that happened within the space of 2 years. So very, very fast. It happened also largely during the pandemic. So there was a lot of change, both personally and professionally. The move to an IC role was into a different organization. And that was a part of why I moved. And I'll put up on my LinkedIn after school. There's actually a podcast I spoke about this on in a lot more detail recently, why I made that decision. What it boils down to is I didn't feel ready to be in management. And there was an opportunity to kind of step back and go, look, I'm going to go and be an IC in a different company and kind of just learn a bit more about what it is to be an SE, right? To be in this profession. I then came back to Loftware about a year later, actually into the role that I'm in now, which is this IC leadership role. And what that kind of did was it gave me a chance to reflect on, like, I went to management, wasn't the right thing at the time. Reflect on why it wasn't the right thing, and reflect on maybe what I can do to then kind of come back in at that point and go, you know what, I things were not quite right, but now there's an opportunity for me to start building a brand as a leader, and I can bring lessons that I've learned from a different organization back across and say, hey, look, this is stuff that I learned. Let's give this a try, and then kind of start getting back on that path. So I think it's also the fact that it's not a linear thing. I mean, it hasn't been linear, and it can go up, and you find sometimes, well, maybe that's not right, but that's going to happen to me. And then, I'm now back in that same organization, so I'm going to be a manager in that organization, but there's a lot of change that's happened as well. And so I think, again, it's kind of going, the time feels right now, compared to 2.5 years ago when that originally sort of happened. But maybe kind of happened a bit more by accident. Right? Now it's a bit more, definitely more sort of like, this has been set up, this is a path, and I know there's a kind of a journey forwards that I'm super excited about.
So I wanted to add as well a little bit about, for any folks who I know the next session we'll talk a little bit about ICs versus people management, et cetera. My story, similar to Paul, I started to think about, hey, what's next for me? So I came from the higher education space. So I hadn't even thought of tech pre-sales. This was a whole career change for me. And then once I was there, it takes about a year. Workday has a large product suite, a year to kind of even know what you're doing. And then I got to year 3 and I started to think about what was next. And there was a management position that was open for a team. And I started to think, do I want to do that? And someone brought it up to me and I'm like, I don't know. I'm thinking about the IC versus management piece. And then the day I had clarity and I decided, actually, nope, that role is not for me, I got a call from our VP of pre-sales. And she's like, hey, there's a position and I'd love for you to work on it with me. And I'm like, I've never heard of this position. I didn't know. It was a program management piece that served as a chief of staff in our organization. And so one thing I will say is the only reason why she knew to call me was because I had, on the calls, the all workmate calls or all hands calls, people are saying like, oh, call me if you have an issue, or like leadership is always saying like, reach out to me via Slack. But I actually take people up on those sorts of offers. So being able to I was having quarterly meetings with her. So she was able to get to know what I was doing. She got to know my personality, what was happening on my team. And to the points earlier, talking about what's working well and what's not. like identifying, to Paul's point, what's inefficient, what is frustrating everyone. And I was able to be candid and clear about those things and propose some solutions. So moving into that chief of staff sort of role within my organization was great, because it allowed me to have such a larger picture of the business. And it was definitely a leadership role that I was working with our directors and our managers in that role, but it didn't require me to manage people. So I wanted to highlight that, because I know that there may be people who are on the line who are interested in maybe taking that next step, but don't want to manage people. And so thinking about what other options are available in your enablement teams or in your operations teams, I was able to identify the things that challenged me as a solution consultant, and then create programs or create initiatives to solve those problems for everyone. So to Paul's point about being the one who stepped up, like, I'm frustrated by this, I'm actually going to help everybody solve this. And then I will say too, one last piece. And when we think about branding and what we want internally, it's okay to rebrand, right? So I got into the role. I loved it. It was more of a 1-year rotation sort of thing. And now I'm back in the field, but I'm back in the field as an even stronger leader on my team, because I have such an expanded view of the business from having gone to that chief of staff role. And now in my demos, when I'm thinking about our work with our team, I'm so much more strategic, right? So even though it was a position that I wasn't going to be in for the rest of my life, it was super, super helpful to say yes to that opportunity. And that's what I think in terms of how you navigate, saying yes, meeting more people, being able to network, and knowing that it doesn't have to be something that you do forever. You don't have to retire. Like to Paul's point, making a choice, then you make another choice. It's okay to rebrand. It's okay to redefine what energizes you. And I think we should be taking those assessments regularly of, is this fun for me? Do I love this? Am I having the greatest impact that I want in whatever role that is? So always be thinking about that.
I love that. You brought up a couple of great points. First of all, I love my favorite question to ask someone in pre-sales is, how the heck did you get into pre-sales? Because like you said, Jasmine, like everybody comes from such a varied background. And I also love what you said about the rebranding. You know, in our lives, we really change a lot. I mean, when I started in pre-sales years ago, I was single. Over that time, I got married. I had my first child. I had my second child. And I became a very different person, whatever your life's journey is. I always knew in the back of my mind that at some point I would want to move into leadership. But it's one of those things, if you're a parent, I know you can relate, but you know, it's never the right time to have kids, right? Or look at the interest rates. It's never the right time to buy a house. Like, it never feels like the right time. It felt very much the same way moving into a leadership role. In fact, I had wanted it for so long. And when the opportunity was finally there, I freaked out. I got really scared. And I thought, how am I going to juggle all of this? You know, I have 2 little kids that need me. The time we were going into the pandemic. Like, I guess my point is, there's never going to be the right time either. If you feel it in your gut that it's not the right time, it's not the right time. But if you're just think twice about if you're using that as an excuse too, because it is scary. It is scary. And that's part of the beauty about Pre-Sales Collective, is that post in one of the chats, somebody's been in your shoes and somebody's going to walk you through it. I had someone at the time tell me, this isn't, to your points earlier, both you, Paul and Jasmine, this is not a permanent decision. You can get out if it's not right for you. Don't use that as a parachute, right? Like, immediately see it through first, but you don't have to be locked into this moving forward. So try it no matter where you are in your life.
I love it.
I think
So many good points
as well. If you have a strong brand in your organization, they are not going to want to let you go. And if you go to your manager and say, hey, look, I took this role on, it's not quite working out, that's going to, increase. They're going to be like, okay, great, I'm so glad you came to me. And I think the message of manager a long time ago resonated with me. He said, the last thing I would want for any employee to tell me when they're leaving is that there's something that I could have done that could have helped them stay. And I think rebranding, rechanging, going, look, this isn't right, but having those honest conversations, because Kelly as well, right? Fellow parent of 2 young children, you quite often feel like you're not doing enough or not doing the right thing or someone's doing it better than you. We all get that imposter syndrome. But if you kind of hold your hand up and say, look, hey, maybe I need to go and get a coach. Maybe I just need to like speak to someone else in my org and just say, look, I'm not sure if what I'm doing is right. Can you just like give me half an hour a week just to like soundboard to my ears? Because people will do that, and will much rather that you go to them and say that than you suffer in silence and just think, oh, this isn't working out, I'm a failure. You know, because everyone's been on that journey, and I think the longer I've gone on in my career, the more I've always looked, and I think it's like coming back to being a child. When you're a little child, you look at your parents, you look at adults and think, they've got it sorted. They know exactly what they're doing. They have everything lined up. There's never anything. And I think, you know, it's the same in our careers. You go think, yeah, right, the person, yeah, they're absolutely organized. And you kind of get to there and go, why is it so chaotic? Why do I not know what I'm doing? And the reality is everyone's in that position. Everyone's been there, everyone's there to a greater or lesser extent. And just having that conversation and being able to know that, yeah, you're not locked into the place. Don't parachute, but use it as like a fallback, but also don't feel like you're stuck because you're not. Right? There's always other things that you could be doing.
Yeah, good points, Paul. Appreciate that. And Kelly, your point on I have 2 young children and I know exactly where you're coming from. So Paul, you actually teed up this Q&A perfectly, which came in and it said, what would the panelist advice be when you're wanting to move into a leadership and management role, but your direct manager sees it as a threat? That is an incredible question. They withhold opportunities that are preventing you from advancing. So Kelly, I want to pass it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I'm going to give an answer that some folks might not love. So hear me out. There is a very, very real thing as office politics. So using your network is going to be more important than ever. I have no idea, it's an anonymous attendee, so I have no idea who this person is. I have no idea who their manager is, but I would say right off the bat, that manager is clearly very insecure. So I think it's important to recognize that. That's the job of a manager is to always be looking at how you're going to be developing those people on your team. So I really struggle with. Again, some people might feel a little uncomfortable with this, but I think this is the opportunity where you need to frankly work around that person. You know, who is their leader? Can you build a relationship with them? Who are their peers? Can you build a relationship with them? I think don't let that one person hold you back. There are other avenues. It might actually be worth the exercise we use Workday, love Workday, Jasmine. I love the org chart feature in Workday. I use it all the time. If you have some sort of org chart like that, you know, pop it open, write it down, and really think about, have I connected with these people? You're probably thinking I have talked to all of them, but it's worth it to take that exercise, look at the people in your direct leadership chain up and that leadership chain out, their peers, and talk to them. I really, really feel this is probably coming from a place of insecurity. And I don't want you to let that stop you from moving up. There's other ways around this. Feel free to Slack me on this side too. We could chat more. But I feel very passionate that don't let this person, in fact, let that fuel your fire, right? Do all the things that they say, and build your brand with others around that person, above, to the right and to the left, and of course to your peers too. I think that's going to be a really key, really a key strategy there.
Awesome. And I just want to give a time check. We have about 5 more minutes. I'll pass it over to you, Jasmine. Thank you,
Awesome.
Kelly.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kelly. I just wanted to punctuate two quick things. I do think there's a lot to office politics, and I hope this person feels emotionally and psychologically safe and that can have other conversations. But one thing I would say that I've had success with is being able to drive the conversations with my manager and let them know, keep them in the loop, right? They say bad news doesn't age well, or any news. I think keeping them abreast of what you're doing so that they're not feeling like you're going and being seedy and talking to folks behind their back. Like, I have created an agenda that I use for my meetings with my one-on-one, where I'm talking about the work, the business, but also here's the people I met this week. Here's what I learned from them. So being able to try to create allies as much as possible, keeping them in the loop so that they know what you're doing, and ask them for advice. Hey, I met with the VP of this. They wanted to know what we thought about this, and like bring them, or have a joint meeting, like bring ideas, be able to build connections so that they don't feel like you're going beyond them. And then the second point I wanted to make in terms of how we think about internal brand and navigating, I totally agree with what you're saying about finding folks outside of your direct manager. And the point I'd like to share here is that your manager is likely not the one to hire you for your next role. Right? My manager, I'm already working for them. So I need to meet other people. How do I get on other folks' short list when they're looking for folks? So I think it's absolutely critical that not only do you keep your current manager in the loop, but talk to other people, talk to other leaders, talk to other folks who are hiring managers as well. So your manager can't be your only gateway to other opportunities.
That's a much better way to put it. Look at me, I'm going all mama bear. I'm like, go around that person.
Oh, that's incredible, Jasmine. I mean, and both of your points are so key. It's like they're not, bring them with you, offer something, right? Offer something, bring something to the table for them. I love that. Paul, over to you.
Yeah, I think the kind of, like I would say, okay, right, your manager is a decision maker. They are not the decision maker. And I think the other thing about that is that ultimately, and I think kind of like Kelly's point, the person in charge of your career is you. And you have to own it. And I think you will, again, unfortunately, there will be managers you have a great relationship with, managers you have an okay relationship with. That is just a part of growing and progressing. And I think if you focus, rather than kind of focusing on, and it's really hard, and I've been in, and Phil's really slapped me as well, right, confidentially, I've been in a similar position to you a while ago, and it's super, super hard to know how to get out of it. But if you just go, look, I own my career, and it's my responsibility to drive that forward. What can I do to progress? I think Jasmine just gave some golden nuggets there of how to do that, building those relationships, bringing that manager along, being open. It's just saying, look, this is it, but take control, right? Because it's your career, and no one has more control over it than you do.
Yeah, good points, Paul. I mean, I was in a similar situation too. And one of the things I turned to was PreSales Collective before I came into this position, of course. And I made friends and I made allies. I'm still friends with people I connected with who we chat all the time. I was in a process where I was looking for a new role, and Karsten, I'll do a shout out for him. He's speaking at the summit. He would literally text me in the morning and say, hey, how's it going? And I can't tell you how much that meant to me, right? And this is the place to do that. You cannot do that. We're not selling SaaS today. This is about connecting. It's about those deep level relationships. That's why I'm so passionate about this. That's the place.